Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today, mostly because we're tackling something literally every single one of us wrestles with, making really tough, high stakes decisions without falling straight into our own emotional traps. I mean, we've all been there, right? Staring down a crossroad, feeling completely paralyzed, or maybe worse, rushing into a choice only to majorly regret it later. Kind of like buying that incredibly expensive treadmill that is now basically just a very sturdy clothes rack. Well, today we're pulling directly from a fascinating framework that completely transforms how we gather data for decision making. We're going to learn how to step back, look at reality objectively, and make choices that actually align with what we want out of life. So, to make this really practical right out of the gate, I want you to do something for me. I want you to mentally hold on to a difficult life choice that you are facing right now. Maybe it's a career pivot, a crossroad in a relationship, or even a major financial investment. Got it? Hold it right there in your mind. We're going to apply today's theoretical framework directly to your personal situation so you can walk away with absolute clarity. Now, to kick things off, consider this brilliant quote from Antonio R. Damasio. We are not thinking machines that feel, we are feeling machines that think. This perfectly sets up what the text calls the illusion of choice. You see, we really like to believe we're deeply rational creatures, but the source material highlights that our worldviews, our unconscious beliefs, and all our past experiences are constantly distorting our reality. We basically filter our human needs through these hidden biases, which means we often rely on emotional reasoning completely disguised as logic. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll unpack the decision trap. Then we'll put on our four lenses: facts and evidence, logic and reasoning, emotions and intuition, and the outside perspective. And finally, we'll bring it all together to make your choice. All right, starting with section 1, the decision trap, and exactly why we make bad choices. Good decisions absolutely require good data, but our egos have a nasty habit of hijacking this process before it even begins. The cortex defines a problem really simply. It's just a misalignment. It's the gap between what we aspire to have and our actual lived experience of reality. But here's the catch. Before we can choose an alternative to bridge that gap, we have to consciously gather information. Why? Because as we touched on, our needs are filtered through unconscious beliefs that severely distort reality. If we don't consciously interrupt that process, we end up trying to solve the wrong problem entirely. Moving right along to section 2, lens 1, facts and evidence. This is all about grounding ourselves in objective reality. Okay, thinking back to that tough decision you locked into your mind earlier, this is your very first tool. You absolutely must know the difference between a fact and an assumption. It sounds simple, but it's a real game changer. For example, a fact is, I have $50 in the bank. An assumption is, I'm going to be broke forever. Facts are things like numbers, dates, real-world results, written records, or actual time spent. Assumptions are just guesses, fears, and unverified beliefs. So to avoid biased thinking, you have to forcefully ask yourself, what do I know for sure? Not what you think is happening, not what you fear is happening, but what is objectively measurable in the real world. Strip away the story, folks, and just look at the raw data. Next up, section 3, lens 2, logic and reasoning, or connecting the dots. So once we have those raw, totally unarguable facts, we need to analyze how they actually fit together. Logic is really just about asking, what makes sense based on the objective facts we just gathered? First, identify cause and effect. If A happened, did it actually cause B, or are they just a coincidence? Second, notice historical patterns. Have you been in this exact situation before? And third, review past decisions. What were the outcomes when similar circumstances popped up in the past? You're basically acting as a detective here, looking at the structural logic of your problem without letting your ego muddy the waters. All right, section 4 brings us to lens 3, emotions and intuition, using feelings as data. Now, you might be thinking a solid objective decision-making framework would tell you to just, completely ignore your feelings. But nope, not this one. And this is actually one of the most profound takeaways from the source material. Feelings are not facts, period. Just because you feel anxious doesn't mean a disaster is actually right around the corner. However, feelings are highly valid data points. If you notice a sudden spike in stress, a wave of excitement, a heavy feeling of resistance, or even a sigh of relief when you consider an option, pay attention. Those emotions are crucial clues. They usually point toward unmet needs or unspoken concerns. Don't let them drive the car, for sure, but definitely let them have a voice from the passenger seat. Moving to section 5, lens 4, the outside perspective, and overcoming egocentric bias. This right here is your ultimate safeguard against that sneaky bias that tells you you're the center of the universe. Ask yourself, What would a wise person say if I explain this to them? You can literally go ask a trusted friend, or simply imagine how a totally neutral third party would see the situation. The text heavily emphasizes this because we all have massive blind spots. It's like walking around with a huge piece of spinach in your teeth, you just can't see it yourself. An outside perspective challenges our one-sided thinking and cuts right through that emotional fog we've built up around our problem. Plus, it forces us to explain the situation clearly, which honestly often reveals the answer right then and there. And finally, Section 6, making your choice, bringing it all together. So we've gathered all our data, we've looked at the hard facts, we've applied logic, we've checked our emotional gauges, and we've sought outside wisdom. And this brilliantly illustrates how it all comes together. When you run a single decision through these four lenses side by side, the magic literally happens. Under facts and evidence, we ask, what do I know for sure to avoid guessing? Under logic and reasoning, we ask, what makes sense to find the root causes? With emotions and intuition, we ask, what am I feeling to spot our hidden needs? And with the outside perspective, we ask, what would they say to finally see those blind spots? Once you do this, the emotional fog lifts, leaving you with just reality. Now, to help you actually pull the trigger on your newly well-rounded decision, the text gives us these incredibly actionable mental tools. First up, uphill decisions. When you're torn between two choices, choose the one that involves short-term pain for long-term gain. Why? Because human beings naturally tend to overvalue short-term comfort. Second, Solomon's paradox. If you are completely, painfully stuck, just imagine you're making the decision for a friend. Taking yourself out of the equation instantly reduces your emotional bias. And third, the hesitation heuristic. If you're hesitating, but the decision involves your core values, your integrity, or your personal growth, well, the answer is almost always yes. So let's bring it all back to that difficult decision you've been holding in your mind. Which of these four lenses are you actively neglecting right now? Are you completely ignoring the hard facts? Are you letting your emotions dictate the whole narrative instead of just using them as helpful data points? I challenge you to apply this framework today. Step out of your comfort zone, put on all four lenses, and face reality squarely. Because once you see the truth clearly, the real question isn't, what should I do? It's, what am I waiting for? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you next time.